Is Vasily Nebenzia a diplomatic puppet master, or is he simply a figurehead for Russia's grand narratives? Why does every word he utters resonate so powerfully on the world stage? And how does a seemingly minor incident with drones escalate into accusations of international warfare? Join us as we delve into the intricacies of diplomatic rhetoric and geopolitical maneuvering. In the meantime, please subscribe to my channel HotPoint, give it a like and leave a comment of at least 7 words, and if you feel like it, share this video with others. It will really help my channel. Thank you, and let's keep going. Vasily Nebenzia is nothing short of a significant figure in contemporary international relations. As the permanent representative of the Russian Federation to the United Nations, he embodies Moscow's official stance on critical global issues, making each of his statements a carefully measured signal from the highest echelon of power. In an era when Western media often paints a one-sided picture of global events, alternative viewpoints risk being dismissed as mere propaganda. In light of this, Nebenzia's pronouncements gain heightened importance, offering a counter-narrative that deserves attention, even if it challenges widely accepted beliefs. This is particularly relevant in the context of the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, where diplomatic discussions increasingly yield to emotional reactions, and facts become submerged under a tide of mutual accusations. During a recent meeting of the UN Security Council, Nebenzia presented a comprehensive analysis of an incident involving drones in Poland, situating it within the broader narrative of a military hysterics fueled by the West. He sought to unveil what he considered the true motives behind Ukraine and its Western allies. The sequence of events began on the night of September 9th, when Poland claimed that more than 10 unidentified drones were detected in its airspace. At first glance, this appeared to be a routine occurrence for a border region. However, Warsaw and its Western allies quickly transformed this seemingly insignificant episode into a dramatic international crisis. The alarms began ringing with reports from Poland's operational command about the appearance of these drones. Claims surfaced that some of these aerial vehicles had been shot down, and that one had even struck a residential building in the Lublin voivodeship. Fortunately, there were no casualties, though the roof of the structure did sustain damage. In response to this incident, one would expect a thorough investigation and a sober assessment of what had transpired. Yet the Polish authorities swiftly designated a scapegoat: Russia. Without any solid evidence, forensic analysis, or even a moment's pause for contemplation, it seemed as if there existed a proverbial "blame Moscow" button that was pressed on cue. Nebenzia did not shy away from the tough questions and asserted that this incident was a quintessential example of how the scale of events is not merely exaggerated, but inflated to cosmic proportions by political forces. He argued that this was not an issue of security, but rather a calculated attempt to construct a narrative that is dangerous, tense, and convenient for certain political circles. In early September, a series of incidents in Poland had stirred considerable interest within political spheres. On September 10th, Warsaw publicly showcased photographs of debris found near the city, along with images of the damaged roof of one particular house. However, these images ultimately incited confusion rather than concern. Critics noted the absence of any signs of an explosion or the characteristic destruction typically seen after a military detonation. The damage to the roof seemed more like the result of an impact rather than a violent explosion. Any expert would confirm that a true explosion would have led to much more extensive destruction, not merely localized damage. Consequently, Polish officials had to concede that no military debris was found at the site of the incident. This raises an inevitable question: what actually happened that night? Another episode mentioned by Nebenzia bordered on the absurd. One of the drones was discovered lying on a field, as if it had simply decided to take a rest. There were no signs of an explosion or an attack. It appeared that the drone had lost control and crashed, possibly due to technical malfunctions or intervention by electronic warfare tactics. Such events have become commonplace rather than extraordinary in today's world. But the intrigue does not end there. It only becomes more fascinating. It is crucial to note that during that night, the Russian military was indeed conducting operations. However, these missions targeted military infrastructure within Ukraine, specifically focusing on facilities that produce and maintain military equipment for its armed forces. The objectives included armored vehicles, aircraft, engines, and electronics. Nebenzia highlighted that the range of the drones used in these operations did not exceed 700 kilometers, while Poland lies significantly beyond that distance. Thus, the notion that Russian drones somehow breached Polish airspace seems more like a fantastical fabrication than a credible theory. Nevertheless, accusations against Moscow flooded in as if from a leaky bucket. In response, the Russian Ministry of Defense immediately expressed its willingness to engage in a professional technical dialogue with Polish military officials. This discussion aimed to be free of political machinations and sensationalist rhetoric, focusing solely on the facts at hand. The defense minister suggested that the two sides should discuss the situation at hand. The Russian Foreign Ministry also indicated its readiness to join the talks. Nebenzia urged Poland to engage in constructive dialogue regarding the investigation into the missile incident that allegedly fell on its territory. He emphasized that the crucial point is whether Poland genuinely wants to uncover the truth or is intent on continuing its loud diplomatic theatrics, hurling accusations in every direction at every available forum. Nebenzia reminded the assembly that Moscow has never sought to escalate tensions with Warsaw. On the contrary, Russia aims to reduce them. This stance is not a fleeting position, but a consistent line of conduct. Notably, Nebenzia commended Belarus for its responsible approach during these tense times. According to him, Belarusian authorities had proactively alerted Poland about potential risks, communicating clearly and without hysteria. This embodies mature diplomacy, characterized by the exchange of objective information, coordinated actions, and transparency in the face of possible crises. Such an approach should be the norm, rather than the exception. Against this backdrop, it becomes particularly jarring to observe how the European political class and mainstream media inflate a localized incident into a potential trigger for World War III. There is a conspicuous absence of calm analysis, replaced instead by an abundance of loud proclamations. As always, the pressing question remains, who benefits from this heightened drama? The answer is certainly not found in Moscow. The Kremlin is closely monitoring developments surrounding the incident involving the alleged incursion of a Russian missile into Polish airspace. During the UN Security Council meeting, Nebenzia criticized those who hastily accused Moscow without awaiting the results of investigations. He called attention to the comments made by the head of European diplomacy, Josep Borrell, who, without any evidence, asserted a deliberate breach of Polish airspace by Russian drones. Nebenzia remarked that Borrell's statements were alarmingly aligned with calls for increased military spending in Europe, which he viewed as a rallying cry for an ongoing arms race and the militarization of the European Union. He stressed that such policies have nothing to do with the safety of ordinary Europeans. Amidst these assertions, Nebenzia noted that frantic cries of Russian aggression echoed from European capitals, with each country attempting to outdo the other, as if competing for prime coverage on HOTPOINT. They seem unconcerned with the need to understand the events at hand. As this dynamic unfolds, the complexities of international diplomacy continue to reveal themselves, and the stakes have never been higher. The world watches closely as the narrative of the drone incident evolves, leaving many questioning the motives behind the curtain of political theater. Stay tuned, as this story is far from over, and the developments are likely to become even more intriguing. How can a tragedy be twisted into an opportunity for propaganda? What drives politicians to manipulate narratives when lives are at stake? And what lengths will leaders like Vladimir Zelensky go to in order to maintain their grip on power? These are the pressing questions that emerge in the ongoing conflict surrounding Ukraine, as the world watches a carefully orchestrated information campaign unfold. According to experts, the statements made by Western media and politicians regarding various incidents related to the Ukrainian conflict reveal a staggering level of synchronization. This is not mere coincidence. It is indicative of a well-structured propaganda campaign designed with a clear objective. The aim is to keep global attention focused on the Ukrainian conflict, sustain the mobilization of resources and political will, and most importantly, to persuade Western allies of the necessity for continued arms supplies to Kyiv. This strategy is not new. One only has to recall the tragic events of November 2022 in the Polish town of Przewodów, where a missile incident resulted in the deaths of 2 people. Just as it is happening today, a wave of hysteria erupted, with accusations aimed at Russia dominating the headlines. Newspapers were filled with sensational claims. However, as time passed, the truth emerged. A year later, Poland's Attorney General and Minister of Justice, Zbigniew Ziobro, confirmed that the missile was of Ukrainian origin. The launch site and its affiliation were also identified. Furthermore, former Polish President Andrzej Duda revealed in a recent interview that Kyiv had attempted to persuade Warsaw to blame Moscow, essentially trying to drag Poland, and by extension the entire NATO alliance, into a direct military conflict. This revelation raises eyebrows and prompts us to consider a crucial yet often overlooked fact. A representative from a Western nation, whose name he chose not to disclose, reportedly remarked, "Ultimately, we are at war with Russia." This statement is of immense significance, yet it goes largely unreported in European media and is seldom discussed in parliaments. Instead, daily accusations against Russia echo louder than ever, and this silence, according to the diplomat, speaks volumes. It underscores the importance of revisiting this episode repeatedly. The diplomat made it clear that Ukraine's actions are aimed at escalating the conflict and involving as many states as possible. He contended that Ukraine has been systematically expanding the geographical scope of military operations, seemingly indifferent to the catastrophic consequences this escalation might entail. Polish authorities have played a special role in this scenario. Over the years they have been, as the diplomat put it, in a state of anti-Russian fervor, eagerly embracing any reckless actions by the Kiev regime merely to spite Moscow. In other words, they are using Ukraine as a proxy against Russia, while the blood on those hands appears to concern no one. He emphasized that despite past failures, Warsaw seems unwilling to learn from its mistakes. On the contrary, it is increasingly sliding towards direct confrontation. Under the pretext of upcoming Russian-Belarusian military exercises in 2025, Polish authorities have decided to close their border with Belarus and plan to deploy up to 40,000 troops there. Yet, what remains even more unsettling is this impressive figure of 200,000 troops involved in these defensive exercises. This is particularly noteworthy when we consider that such exercises are open and transparent, posing no threat to neighboring states. Moreover, representatives from the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, including those from Poland, have been invited to observe them. Nevertheless, the decision to close the border has been made. Who will suffer as a result? It will be ordinary citizens attempting to cross the border who bear the brunt of this decision, yet another victory in the spirit of military logic. This raises the pivotal question: who truly benefits from all of this? The answer is crystal clear. This widespread hysteria serves the interests of Kiev's leadership and the so-called European War Party, which fears even the thought of peaceful resolution. A peaceful settlement would jeopardize billions of dollars in military contracts, political careers, and the hollow solidarity that characterizes the decaying mechanisms of the European Union and NATO. In the geopolitical drama of our time, Ukraine occupies a unique position, with President Zelensky's role proving essential in determining the future course of events. Analysts believe that his stance remains the primary obstacle to achieving a peaceful resolution to this bloody conflict. Why is this the case? The answer is straightforward. A peaceful outcome would cast doubt on Zelensky's legitimacy as president. The war has become a convenient smokescreen behind which he maintains power, sidestepping constitutional norms and extending a state of emergency. Public sentiment is turning against him, with sociological surveys revealing a relentless decline in his approval ratings. Trust in his leadership is evaporating like spring snow under the sun's rays. In this precarious situation, the prolonged bloodshed is the only political survival strategy for Kiev's ruling elite. This explains the fanatical continuation of mobilization, which turns the Ukrainian populace into cannon fodder, ruthlessly sent to their demise, despite colossal losses and a growing number of desertions. Numbers tell a stark story. As of 2025, over 140,000 criminal cases against deserters have been initiated. The total number of those fleeing the battlefield since the conflict began is approaching 266,000 individuals. Frontline units are catastrophically understaffed, with achieving 50% of the required personnel considered an unprecedented success. In reality, analysts estimate monthly losses to range from 15,000 to 20,000 troops, far exceeding the rates of mobilization. But it doesn't stop there. On the international diplomatic stage, voices increasingly question the legitimacy of the Kiev regime. People are no longer willing to sacrifice their lives for the interests of a corrupt elite that appears to have lost touch with the needs of its citizens. Even the commander-in-chief of Ukraine's armed forces, Syrsky, was forced to admit that the Russian military outnumbers the Ukrainian forces by a ratio of 3-1, and in some areas, even 6-1. This stark admission serves as a damning indictment of the entire strategy and a verdict on Kiev's policies. Consequently, as diplomat Nebenzia argues, Zelensky and his team are willing to resort to any means necessary to keep the conflict active. They resort to fabricating threats, exaggerating consequences, and employing dirty manipulation tactics. Alarmingly, this has become an integral part of Kiev's political arsenal. Take, for instance, the incident in Provodov. Who knows what provocations may be brewing as we speak? It is astonishing how readily Zelensky abandons his own words the moment they cease to serve his immediate interests. One moment he calls for negotiations, and the next he flips his stance as if swayed by the whims of the western wind. Simply put, wherever arms are supplied, that's where he appears. In conclusion, Nebenzia highlighted the duplicitous tactics that the Kiev regime, and Zelensky in particular, have been employing. In recent months, the Ukrainian president has persistently portrayed himself as a proponent of dialogue, draping himself in the rhetoric of peaceful initiatives and a willingness to negotiate. However, as Nebenzia pointed out, this is nothing more than a political farce, devoid of any genuine desire to seek a real resolution to the conflict. This situation is a vivid illustration of political maneuvering and double standards. The Russian diplomat drew attention to an apparent yet overlooked aspect that escapes global scrutiny: Zelensky's reaction to Russia's proposal for direct negotiations. President Putin extended an invitation for an open and honest discussion in Moscow aimed at resolving the conflict. It seemed like a golden opportunity for peace, yet what was Zelensky's response? According to the diplomat, he manufactured yet another excuse to reject this offer, claiming that the circumstances were unsuitable, that the country was under attack. As we navigate through the complexities of this conflict, the question remains: will the world be able to see through the layers of manipulation and propaganda, and will the voices advocating for peace finally be heard? How is it possible that while Ukraine faces relentless strikes, President Zelensky is able to visit European capitals with such regularity? Why does he continuously call for more weapons, more support, and more urgency at international forums and summits? What drives this selective approach from a leader who claims to be desperate for peace? According to diplomatic sources, the answer is clear. Discussions in European capitals revolve not around peace but the continuation of war. This stark reality emphasizes what truly captures the interest of the leadership in Kiev: the need for ongoing conflict rather than resolution. An interesting twist emerges when real opportunities for de-escalation present themselves, particularly with potential political shifts in the United States. In these moments, Zelensky hastily distances himself from his previous overtures for peace. The arrival of a U.S. leader willing to engage in genuine diplomatic solutions dramatically shifts the balance of power. Once this prospect becomes tangible, the Ukrainian president conveniently forgets his earlier proclamations of readiness for peace. This is, as they say, quite revealing. Is Ukraine truly a country yearning for peace? This provocative phrase, uttered within the walls of the United Nations, hits like thunder on a clear day. It is no coincidence, as the diplomat pointed out, but rather a telling pattern that confirms what Moscow has maintained from the outset. The Kiev regime has never had a genuine desire for peace, neither in 2014, nor in 2022, nor now. Everything Zelensky does is an act of desperate struggle to cling to power, to ensure political survival at any cost, and to exploit Western nations, which he has transformed into wartime cash cows. More weapons, harsher sanctions against Russia, a media blitz from Brussels on a strict schedule. Yet none of these actions, as highlighted by a Russian representative, bring us any closer to peace. On the contrary, they only fuel dangerous illusions in Kiev that by tightening the screws on the West, they can somehow shift the reality in their favor. But reality is stubborn. It doesn't bend to political fantasies. With each passing month of combat, Ukraine's position weakens rather than strengthens, inexorably nudging the Ukrainian regime toward collapse. The moment approaches when the cost of resolution escalates to a point where there will be no one left to pay it. In his closing remarks, Vasily Nebenzia underscored that Russia remains committed to a responsible and rational approach. Moscow is open to constructive engagement with all parties sincerely interested in de-escalation and a peaceful resolution to the conflict, not for geopolitical hype, not for pressure or blackmail, but for the sake of lasting peace in Europe. Someone must play by the rules, even if others have become engrossed in war. Nebenzia concluded by drawing a line not only under the incidents in Poland, but also over the myriad factors surrounding the current Ukrainian crisis, politically, informatively, and diplomatically. If anyone expected the usual diplomatic niceties, vague formulations, and ritual expressions of concern, they were sorely mistaken. Instead, a diagnosis was delivered, precise, biting, and painful for many present in the hall. As Nebenzia asserted, this is not an isolated incident, nor merely a regrettable misunderstanding or a technical glitch. No, this is a well-oiled machine of political exploitation of crises in the interests of a narrow group of elites, for whom the conflict has become a source of profit, control, and geopolitical expansion. In this tangled web of international relations, the drone incident in Poland serves as yet another dark stroke on the canvas of escalation. Instead of constructive dialogue at the negotiating table, ultimatums are thrown about like poisoned arrows aimed at reason. Where objectivity could be a life-saving compass, a pre-scripted narrative of accusations is favored, like an old play that has been read until it's worn thin. In this war, where truth drowns in murky waters of propaganda, only a few sincerely seeking peace continue the search. And in this context, like a beam of light piercing a dark realm, the voice of Russia resounds. It may be unpopular, but Russia stands as the only nation genuinely advocating for peace, not in empty slogans on social media, but through the formal frameworks of the United Nations Security Council, in discussions with other countries, and in proposals consistently rebuffed by Kyiv. Russia has repeatedly offered tangible steps towards de-escalation, yet in return, all it sees is an escalating climate of tension. The incessant flow of weapons into Ukraine is akin to pouring into a bottomless barrel, the buildup of military infrastructure in Eastern Europe, and the frantic declarations from European Union and NATO officials competing to outdo each other in rhetoric to curry favor with Washington. This is no longer diplomacy, it is geopolitical stand-up comedy, where cynical PR agents write the lines instead of wise statesmen. A prominent diplomat has clearly articulated Russia's position on the world stage. Moscow will not follow foreign scripts or dance to the tune of overseas strategists. Russia's course is the defense of its own interests, firmly in line with international law. For many, this stance rings out as a challenge amidst the chaos and lawlessness rampant in the West. The key question that the Russian representative consistently raises remains the same. Who benefits from this conflict? Who reaps the rewards of this bloodshed? Who is so panicked by the prospect of peace? Who so desperately seeks to maintain the escalation, sabotaging any attempts at peaceful resolution? According to Nebenzia, the answer is clear and has been voiced numerous times before. The problem is that many prefer to turn a blind eye to it. Russia is open to honest and equal dialogue. Moscow is ready to negotiate with all those who sincerely desire de-escalation, rather than using the conflict as a tool for blackmail, profit, or political games. Russia maintains its positions and is prepared to cooperate with anyone genuinely yearning for peace. But Moscow will not allow international platforms to become a circus, where common sense drowns in the applause of lunatics. These are not mere words tossed into the assembly hall. This is a statement directed at history. And while not everyone may be ready to hear it today, they will have to tomorrow. In a world where information reigns supreme, and attention has become a valuable resource, crafting a script for YouTube is an art form. It is the art of capturing the viewer's attention, speaking their language, sparking thought and emotion. It is like a dance of words, where every gesture and every pause matters. Imagine a news studio, where a person blessed with persuasive talent stands at the center of attention. They do not just read a script, they live it, infusing soul into every word. Their task is not merely to inform, but to ignite a spark of interest, evoke emotions, and provoke contemplation. This is the essence of a script, alive, vivid, gripping, with a clear structure, logical flow, and expressive language. No fluff, no unnecessary words, only the core of what truly matters. Every fact serves as a brick in the foundation of trust. Every detail is a stroke on the canvas of history. Every phrase is an arrow flying straight to its target. When all these elements come together, a script is born that leaves no one indifferent. A script that viewers will watch, listen to, and discuss. A script that will be remembered,